In my 40 years on the bench, I've seen every type of defendant walk through those courtroom doors. The remorseful ones who can barely look me in the eye, the scared ones whose hands shake as they stand before me, the defiant ones who think they're above the law. But this case, this young woman walked into my courtroom after assaulting a 69-year-old Vietnam veteran at his workplace, and then, while her case was pending, posted on social media calling me dramatic and saying this was literally nothing. Let me tell you what happened and why this case went viral with over 8 million views. Because sometimes the lesson someone needs to learn is the hardest one to teach. The case file landed on my desk on a Monday morning in late September. As I opened it with my coffee, I saw the charge: assault and battery on an elderly person. That alone made me pay attention. The victim's name was Harold Thompson, 69 years old, Vietnam veteran, retired Providence firefighter who'd served our community for 30 years. The defendant, Madison Prescott, 22 years old, recent college graduate, daughter of a prominent local CEO. As I read through the police report, I reached for the DVD that contained security footage from the incident. I've watched thousands of these videos over the decades, but I have to tell you, what I saw made my blood run cold. Here was Harold, this dignified elderly gentleman, simply doing his job at the entrance of an upscale nightclub downtown. And then I watched this young woman strike him across the face with such force that his glasses flew off. I sat back in my chair and thought about Harold, a man who'd served in Vietnam, who'd run into burning buildings to save lives, who was spending his retirement years working security to supplement his pension. He deserved better than this. He deserved respect. The medical report showed facial bruising, a cut near his eye that required 3 stitches, and, what concerned me most, elevated blood pressure that required a brief hospital observation. At 69 years old, an assault like this isn't just painful. It can be dangerous. What troubled me most as I reviewed the file was the defendant's statement to police. No remorse, no accountability, just excuses and deflection. I made a note to myself: pay close attention to this one. Let me walk you through what happened that Friday night at the Eclipse nightclub on Westminster Street. Harold Thompson had been working the door there for about 15 years, a second career after firefighting, something to keep him active and social in his retirement. When I watched the security footage, and I watched it several times, I saw Madison Prescott approach the entrance around 10:30 p.m. with 2 friends. Harold, professional as always, asked for identification. Now, Harold's been checking IDs long enough to spot irregularities immediately, and something about her ID didn't sit right with him. According to the police report and witness statements, Harold politely explained that he needed to verify her identification and asked her to step aside for a moment. That's standard procedure. That's professional. That's what he'd done thousands of times before without incident. But Madison's response, I could see it clearly on the video, was immediate indignation. She stepped closer to him, invaded his personal space, and according to 3 witnesses who gave statements, she said loudly, "Do you know who I am? My father is Richard Prescott. He owns half this city. I've been doing this job long enough to know that when someone leads with, 'Do you know who I am?' what follows usually isn't going to reflect well on their character." And I was right. Harold, maintaining his professionalism, I could see it in his body language, the calm way he held up his hand, explained that it didn't matter who her father was. The rules applied to everyone. He said he'd be happy to let her in once he verified her ID, but he needed to follow protocol. That's when Madison's friend, this is in the police report, pulled out her phone and started recording. "This is going to be hilarious," she said. "Watch what happens when Maddie doesn't get her way." Madison stepped even closer to Harold. She pointed her finger in his face. 7 different witnesses, 7, all reported hearing her say, "You're just a pathetic old man on a power trip. You're nobody. I'm going in this club whether you like it or not." Harold, with the patience of someone who'd dealt with difficult people his entire career, simply shook his head and said, "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." That's when it happened. I watched this on the video, and even though I was prepared for it, seeing it still shocked me. Madison drew back her hand and slapped Harold across the left side of his face with such force that his glasses flew off and landed several feet away. His head snapped to the side. At 69 years old, that kind of impact isn't just assault, it's dangerous. The crack of the slap was picked up on the audio. People in line gasped. Harold stumbled backward, his hand going to his face. I could see blood starting to appear near his eye where her ring had cut him. And here's what made my jaw drop. Madison laughed. Actually laughed. She said, and this is captured clearly on audio, "That's what happens when you disrespect me." Harold, even then, even bleeding, didn't retaliate. He pulled out his radio and called for police backup and medical assistance. That's the kind of man Harold Thompson is. Even after being assaulted, he followed procedure. Madison tried to leave, but club security and several patrons, including 2 off-duty police officers who witnessed the entire thing, detained her until Providence police arrived approximately 4 minutes later. The police report notes that when officers attempted to place her under arrest, Madison became verbally combative, stating multiple times, "My father will have your badges," and "You have no idea who you're messing with." As I continued reviewing the evidence over the following days, the case only became more concerning. The security footage showed 3 different camera angles, all capturing the incident clearly. There was no ambiguity, no question about what happened. This wasn't an accident or a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate assault. 7 witnesses gave written statements to police, and they all corroborated the same sequence of events. The 2 off-duty officers provided particularly detailed accounts, noting Madison's aggressive behavior before the assault and her lack of concern afterward. The medical report from Rhode Island Hospital showed that Harold sustained facial bruising, a laceration near his left eye requiring 3 stitches, and temporary hearing issues in his left ear from the impact. His blood pressure had spiked to dangerous levels, 180/110, requiring monitoring. The attending physician noted that for a patient Harold's age with his medical history, this kind of stress and physical trauma carried serious risks. I reached out to Harold personally, something I don't often do before a case, but I felt it was important. We spoke on the phone, and what struck me most was his dignity. He wasn't angry or vindictive. He was hurt, yes, but more than anything, he seemed disappointed. "Judge," he told me, "I've been disrespected before in this job. It comes with the territory, but I've never been hit. Never. In all my years as a firefighter, in all my years doing security, nobody ever raised a hand to me. I don't understand what's happened to people's sense of respect." Those words stayed with me. What also stayed with me was what happened next. Madison posted bail within hours. Her father's attorney arrived immediately, and by the next morning, she was posting on social media. My clerk brought it to my attention. Instagram stories showing her at brunch with friends, captions like, "That was literally the craziest night," and "Some people are so dramatic." No mention of Harold, no acknowledgement of what she'd done, just treating it like an inconvenient story to tell. By the time Madison's court date arrived 3 weeks later, I learned from my bailiff that cell phone video from the incident had gone viral. One of the bystanders had posted their footage online, and it had been viewed millions of times. Local news picked it up. National news picked it up. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about this case. My clerk told me the video had 8 million views across various platforms. People were outraged, rightfully so. The comments section was filled with anger at Madison's behavior and support for Harold. Veterans groups were calling for maximum penalties. Social media was demanding justice. But here's what I want people to understand. It doesn't matter if 8 people see something or 8 million. In my courtroom, everyone gets the same fair process. The viral attention doesn't change what I do. It doesn't influence my decisions. I focus on the facts, the law, and the person standing in front of me. That said, I won't pretend the public attention didn't create pressure. My office received hundreds of calls and emails, some supportive, some demanding harsh punishment, some, unfortunately, containing threats against Madison. I had to remind my staff and myself, we serve justice, not public opinion. What did concern me was that Madison seemed to be treating this like a publicity opportunity. My bailiff showed me more social media posts, her accounts weren't private, where she posted things like, "Court date Monday, pray for me," with a photo of herself in designer clothing. It wasn't the behavior of someone who understood the gravity of the situation. I made a decision then. I would treat this case exactly as I would any other, but I would make sure Madison understood, really understood, what she had done and why it mattered. When Madison Prescott walked into my courtroom that Monday morning, I observed everything about her demeanor. She wore an expensive outfit, clearly chosen by an attorney trying to make her look respectable, but her body language told a different story. She walked in with confidence, bordering on arrogance, barely glancing at Harold, who sat in the front row with visible bruises still healing on his face. The courtroom was packed. Veterans groups had shown up to support Harold, filling 2 entire rows. Local media had cameras positioned at the back. I could feel the tension in the room. I called the court to order and looked at Madison standing before me. "Miss Prescott, you understand the charges against you?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said, but her tone had an edge to it, not quite disrespectful, but not genuinely remorseful either. I reviewed the charges formally. Assault and battery on a person over 65 years old, disturbing the peace, resisting arrest. Then I said, "Miss Prescott, I've reviewed the evidence in this case extensively. Before we proceed, I want to give you an opportunity to address the court. Do you wish to make a statement?" Her attorney leaned over and whispered something to her, but she waved him off. "Your Honor, I want to apologize. What happened that night was wrong, and I regret it." I'd heard thousands of apologies from this bench, some genuine, some tactical. This one felt rehearsed. "Miss Prescott," I said, "I appreciate you saying that, but I need you to help me understand something. I've watched the security footage multiple times. What I see is you becoming aggressive with Mr. Thompson, asserting your family's prominence, and then striking him across the face when he was simply doing his job. Can you explain your thinking in that moment?" She shifted uncomfortably. "The situation escalated, Your Honor. I felt disrespected." "You felt disrespected?" I interrupted, keeping my voice measured but firm. "Miss Prescott, Mr. Thompson was doing his job. He asked to verify your identification, standard procedure that happens hundreds of times every night at that establishment. How did that disrespect you?" "He singled me out," she said, and I heard defensiveness creeping into her voice. "Everyone else was getting in, and he made a big deal about my ID." I looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Prescott, 7 witnesses and multiple camera angles all show the same thing. Mr. Thompson followed standard protocol. What they also show is you asserting that your father owns half this city and that Mr. Thompson was nobody. Those were your words, correct?" I was upset. "That's not what I asked. Were those your words?" She glanced at her attorney, who gave her a slight nod. "Yes, Your Honor." I let that answer sit in the air for a moment. Then I said, "Let me play the security footage for the court." The lights dimmed, and on the screen, everyone watched what I had watched multiple times. The audio was clear. Madison's words were clear. The slap was shocking, even when you knew it was coming. Harold's glasses flying off, his head snapping, the blood appearing. When the lights came back up, I saw Harold in the front row, his hand unconsciously touching his face where the bruise still showed faintly. I looked at Madison. "Miss Prescott, that video shows you striking a 69-year-old veteran with enough force to require medical treatment. How do you explain this?" For the first time, I saw her composure crack slightly. "Your Honor, the angle makes it look worse than it was. I didn't hit him that hard. I felt my patience wearing thin." "Miss Prescott, the medical report shows facial bruising, 3 stitches, and dangerous blood pressure elevation. Mr. Thompson is 69 years old. Are you seriously suggesting this wasn't serious?" Before she could answer, my bailiff approached and handed me his phone. "Your Honor, there's something you need to see." I looked at the screen, and what I saw made everything click into place. Screenshots of Snapchat messages from Madison's account posted just days ago. One showed a photo of my courthouse with the caption, "Judge Caprio thinks he's so scary. This is literally nothing. My dad's lawyer says we'll be done in 10 minutes. Another showed her with friends with the caption, "This old judge is being so dramatic. Like I barely touched that security guard. He's fine. Everyone's making such a big deal." I looked up at Madison, and I'm sure she could see the disappointment in my eyes. "Miss Prescott, my bailiff has just shown me social media posts from your account. Posts made while this case was pending. Posts where you called me dramatic. Posts where you said you barely touched Mr. Thompson and that this was literally nothing." Her face went pale. Her attorney's expression told me he hadn't known about these posts. "So, let me understand," I continued, keeping my voice calm, but letting the disappointment show through. "You apologized to this court moments ago, but during the same period, you've been posting on social media that this case is nothing, that the victim is fine, and that you barely touched him. Which version is true, Miss Prescott? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Let me tell you what I see, I said. I see a young woman who has never been held accountable for her actions. I see someone who believes that her family's wealth and position place her above the rules that apply to everyone else. I see someone who assaulted a 69-year-old veteran and then mocked both him and this court on social media. I turned to Harold. Mr. Thompson, would you like to address the court? Harold stood slowly, with dignity. Your Honor, I don't want to see this young woman's life ruined. But I do want her to understand that I'm not nobody. I served my country in Vietnam. I served this city for 30 years as a firefighter. I was doing my job that night, a job I've done professionally for 15 years without incident. I didn't deserve to be hit. I didn't deserve to be humiliated. And I certainly didn't deserve to be mocked on social media afterward. His voice cracked slightly. I'm 69 years old, Your Honor. I've seen a lot in my life, but I've never seen disrespect like this. I just want her to understand that actions have consequences, that people matter, that respect isn't optional. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of someone crying quietly in the back row. I looked at Madison, and I could see, finally, the reality of the situation beginning to dawn on her face. But was it genuine remorse or just fear of consequences? I wasn't sure yet. I took a moment before speaking. I wanted to choose my words carefully because this wasn't just about punishment. This was about teaching a lesson that should have been learned long ago. Miss Prescott, I want you to understand something. I paused, letting the silence emphasize my words. I've been a judge for 40 years. I've seen thousands of defendants stand where you're standing. Some are remorseful, some are scared, some genuinely made terrible mistakes in moments of weakness. I paused again. You posted on social media during these proceedings that I'm dramatic, that this is literally nothing. Another pause. Let me tell you what's not nothing. Mr. Thompson, sitting right there, served in Vietnam. He served this city as a firefighter for 30 years. He's someone's father, someone's grandfather. He was doing his job professionally, with dignity, when you slapped him across the face hard enough to knock off his glasses and cut his face. At 69 years old, that kind of impact isn't nothing. The bruises on his face aren't nothing. The 3 stitches aren't nothing. His dangerous blood pressure spike isn't nothing. Your complete lack of remorse isn't nothing. I looked directly into her eyes. And your mockery of this court, your dismissal of what you did, your belief that you're above accountability, that isn't nothing either. This sentence isn't about punishment for punishment's sake. It's about teaching you what you should have learned long ago: respect, accountability, and that your actions have consequences, regardless of who your father is or how much money your family has. I read from my notes. Here's what I'm ordering. First, 1 year in the county correctional facility suspended with 2 years of probation. You will report to a probation officer weekly. Any violation of probation terms will result in immediate incarceration. Second, 200 hours of community service to be completed at a veterans facility. You will spend those 200 hours serving the men and women who serve this country. Maybe you'll learn something about service and sacrifice. Third, mandatory anger management and emotional intelligence counseling. Weekly sessions for 1 year. I want documentation of your progress. Fourth, a formal written apology to Mr. Thompson to be submitted to this court and read aloud at a public session 60 days from now. Not an apology written by your attorney, an apology in your own words, demonstrating that you understand what you did and why it was wrong. Fifth, restitution of $5,000 to Mr. Thompson for his medical expenses, pain and suffering, and lost wages. Sixth, you will make a public service announcement about respect for elderly persons and service workers to be distributed through local media and schools. You wanted social media attention, now you'll use it constructively. And finally, complete prohibition of any social media posts related to this case, Mr. Thompson, or these proceedings. Any violation will be considered witness intimidation and will result in immediate incarceration. I looked at her again. Tears were streaming down her face now. Finally, the reality was hitting her. Miss Prescott, I hope you use this time to think about who you want to be, because right now, the person I see in front of me, the person who hit a 69-year-old veteran and then laughed about it, who mocked this court, who believed she was above consequences, that's not who you should be. That's not who I hope you'll become. You're 22 years old. Your life isn't over, but it will be defined by the choices you make from this point forward. Will you learn from this? Will you develop genuine empathy and respect? Or will you continue believing that wealth and privilege exempt you from basic human decency? That choice is yours to make, but understand this. In my courtroom, everyone is equal, everyone is accountable, and everyone must face the consequences of their actions. After I delivered the sentence and adjourned court, Harold approached the bench. He thanked me quietly, his voice thick with emotion. But honestly, I thanked him for his service, for his patience, for his dignity throughout this entire ordeal. He embodied everything that's right about the greatest generation and those who followed their example. Madison was led away by her probation officer for processing, finally crying, really crying, as the weight of reality settled on her shoulders. Sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes people need to face real consequences before change becomes possible. Her father, who'd been sitting in the back trying to remain inconspicuous, approached the bench as well. I expected anger or threats of appeal. Instead, he surprised me. "Judge Caprio," he said quietly, "thank you. She needed to hear that. Her mother and we've given her everything. Maybe we gave her too much. Maybe we didn't teach her what really matters." The video of my ruling went viral within hours, just like the original incident had. People appreciated that someone was being held accountable. The comments section filled with support for Harold and approval of the sentence. Veterans groups issued statements thanking the court. But I'll tell you what I told my clerk that afternoon. I didn't do this for the views or the comments or the viral attention. I did it because it was right. I did it because a 69-year-old veteran deserved justice. I did it because maybe, just maybe, Madison Prescott could learn something that might change the trajectory of her life. A few weeks later, I received a letter from Harold. He wrote about how the case had affected him, but also about his hope that Madison would genuinely change. "Judge," he wrote, "I've forgiven her. I hope she learns. I hope she becomes someone who lifts people up instead of putting them down." That's what would give meaning to all of this. That letter sits in my desk drawer. It reminds me why I do this job. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this case, it's this. Social media isn't real life. Those Snapchats, those posts where you mock consequences, where you dismiss the harm you've caused, they don't make reality disappear. They just reveal your character. In my courtroom, I don't care how many followers you have, whose daughter or son you are, or how much money your family has. What matters is how you treat people, especially people like Harold, veterans, workers, people just doing their jobs with dignity and professionalism. Madison learned that lesson the hard way. Her life is now defined by a viral video and a court case that millions of people watched. But here's what I hope. I hope she takes this experience and genuinely transforms. I hope those 200 hours at the Veterans Facility teach her about service. I hope the counseling helps her develop real empathy. I hope she becomes someone who Harold would be proud to know. Because that's what justice means to me. It's not just about punishment. It's about accountability, yes, but it's also about the possibility of redemption. It's about teaching lessons that create better human beings. After 40 years on this bench, I've learned that people can change. Not everyone does, but some do. The defendants who genuinely learn from their consequences, who develop empathy and respect, who become contributing members of society, those are the success stories that keep me coming to work every day. So to everyone watching, treat people with respect, especially those who serve you, work for you, or help you in any way. Respect isn't about social status or wealth. It's about recognizing the inherent dignity in every human being. And remember, your actions always have consequences. Always. Social media might make you feel invincible, but you're not. None of us are. We're all accountable for what we do and how we treat others. That's what justice means to me. That's what I still believe. And that's why, even at my age, I still put on this robe every day and try to make a difference, one case at a time.